All right, so we're done with Monopoly. Now we got two Monopoly men or more, oligopoly. This is a few sellers within the market, and they can be identical or differentiated products, and unfortunately they are a bit more complex, but we'll get into them. The first oligopoly is cartels. So these are things that where they kind of artificially reduce quantities to increase the price up to the monopoly level, so they can kind of take all of that profit. And some things with cartels to keep in mind is one, that if they're trying to collude, that's most of the time illegal, which is why cartels normally fail. But then also there's incentive to cheat. So if I'm in a cartel and I produce a little bit more than my opponent, I take more money, or I undercut him, so I take more profit. And that kind of battles it down, which kind of keeps cartels in check. But if you can detect who's cheating, so if I can detect if someone's cheating, that'll probably prop up and keep the cartel going for a long time. And just kind of looking here on the graph, we kind of see the difference between monopoly, that's up there with a lower quantity, and then as we go down between the models, we get more and more quantity up until the perfect competition quantity, which is all the way on the other side. Okay, so that's cartels. Now we go to Cournot. This is firms that, for the most part, have the same marginal cost. They have identical products, and then they have to decide simultaneously how much to produce. So this is something where you need to know production beforehand, and how the best way to go about solving this is you have your your demand equation, and you have your two different quantities, and then you're gonna calculate your revenue for one firm by multiplying by the quantity. So price times quantity is gonna equal revenue. So that's where we have our total revenue graph equation. And then once you get that, you're gonna differentiate with respect to that firm's quantity, and that'll give you the marginal revenue for that firm. And then you kind of set that equal to your marginal cost to find the best response function for that firm. And then once you have that, if they have the same marginal cost, you know that it's identical, which means that Q1 will equal Q2, and you can sub that into the equation to solve for your Q1 quantity. And then once you have that, you're going to put that back into your price equation, figure out what the price of the market would be, and now you've solved the Cournot equilibrium. So keep in mind, you want to set it up where you have your big Q broken down into the two smaller Qs, multiply by one of the firms to get their revenue, differentiate that to get their marginal revenue, and then set it equal to marginal cost, and solve that kind of intersection. And one thing to keep in mind is, as we add more and more firms, as n gets larger, we're going to have a cheaper price and more quantity, and we're going to approach the perfectly competitive level up until infinite amount of firms. So here you can see our two different best response functions, and then where they intersect is where you're going to want to produce. So that's Cournot. But what if we were selling something different? So this is what we call Bertrand, or what I like to call Bertrand from Hey Jesse. So for the Bertrand identical product market, we now have identical products, but we set prices simultaneously as opposed to quantities. So it's super easy to change our price. We're just like, oh, this is $5, boom, quick change it to $4, $3, whatever it wants. It's super easy, and our quantity doesn't have to be determined beforehand. So how this is gonna look is, if you imagine I was up against these four kids selling lemonade right beside them, and they had their cups of lemonade, I had my cups of lemonade, they priced it for $2. I'm gonna come in there, I'm gonna say, buy my lemonade, it's the exact same thing, but $1.99. They're gonna look at me and say, whoa, what are you doing? They're gonna price it for $1.90. And we're gonna keep battling it out, undercutting each other until we get to our marginal cost, until we can't go any lower. And so what happens is that it ends up being the exact same as perfectly competitive or perfect competition markets, because we're producing at our marginal cost. Because otherwise, the other firm would just undercut and take the entire market, since they are the same products. So unfortunately, my lemonade business is not going to make any money. But now I'm selling pink lemonade. So now we have a little differentiated product. So now we can set our prices a little bit higher than marginal cost, but we don't know exactly how much higher. We can't really calculate that. All you need to know is that you'll set it a bit higher than marginal cost if it is differentiated. And just like Bertrand, I don't know, I just like him, he's cool. So if you have differentiated products, your best response curves will be a little bit different, and you can set price higher than marginal cost as opposed to equal to marginal cost, which is what you would do with identical products. Okay, so that's oligopoly. Now, monopolistic competition, essentially almost the same thing as perfect competition. The only thing to keep in mind is that rather than being free entry and exit, it's easy. And then products are a little bit differentiated, which means that you can kind of set prices above marginal cost without losing all customers right away. And you're going to be kind of setting but then more firms will kind of enter the market and kind of drive profits down as that short run turns into the long run. This is because more firms enter and take away kind of that profit.